By now, you've done the things the day asked of you. The messages are answered, or they aren't, and they'll keep until morning. The light is off. You found the one position that finally feels like rest, and the room has gone quiet in that particular late way, and somewhere inside that quiet, with nothing left to manage and no one left to be, a thought arrives that you did not send for. It comes in gently, almost reasonable, and it asks what all of this is actually for. The day you just finished, the one coming tomorrow, the whole long chain of them stretching behind you and ahead. And the strangest part is the texture of it. The thought should feel like despair, and somehow it doesn't. It feels more like clarity, as if the brightness of the day had been covering something that only comes clear here, in the dark, once your guard is down. Most nights it slips past before you can hold it. You turn over, sleep takes you, and by morning it has folded itself back into the noise. But it was there. It's there most nights for most people, waiting for the hour when the mind finishes its main business of the day and turns almost idly to the business it never had time for. That thought has a name. It's older than it feels lying there, and for a long stretch of history it was considered the most dangerous idea a human being could hold. The name is nihilism. Strip it down and it's a single suspicion. That meaning isn't built into anything. Not into the day, not into the work, not even into you. And that whatever significance the world seems to carry is significance. We hung on it ourselves, the way you might hang a coat on a hook and then forget, years later, that the hook was ever bare. The man who saw it coming was Friedrich Nietzsche, née Chu, and he was not calm about it. More than 100 years ago, he called nihilism the strangest of all guests, the one already standing at the door, and he believed its arrival would be the great story of the next 200 years. He was describing something slower and larger than any argument, a mood that would seep into everything and become, over generations, the ordinary weather of a civilization, so that when it finally arrived in full, it wouldn't feel like a philosophy at all. It would feel like an ordinary person lying awake, suddenly unsure what any of it was for. So here is the question this whole long night is really about. When that thought comes to you in the dark, nothing matters, none of this means anything. What is it exactly? Is it a discovery? The moment the daytime noise drops away and you finally see a truth the busyness was covering all along? Or is it a mood? Something the dark does to a tired mind, a trick of the late hour that the morning quietly takes back, the way it takes back a dream. Which of those it is, discovery or mood, has been argued over seriously for more than a century, and it still isn't settled. Underneath both answers, though, sits something stranger than either, the possibility that the idea has a way through hidden inside it, that the wall so many people have stood in front of, in despair, turns out on a closer look to be a door. Before we go any further into the dark, one small thing. If a channel that stays with a question like this, slowly, without rushing it toward an answer, is something you'd want more of, then subscribing is the quiet thing that keeps it possible. And there's one thing I'd genuinely like to know from you, down in the comments. The last time a night like this came, the kind where nothing seemed to matter, what did you do the next morning? I read every one of them, and I find them more honest than almost anything in the books. For now, you don't have to do anything with the question at all. Let your shoulders come down from wherever they've been holding all day. It isn't going anywhere, and neither are you. It will keep. Long before it had a name, though, before anyone thought to call it the most dangerous idea in history, it was something a man felt in his own body on a freezing morning in a public square in what he'd been told were the last 60 seconds of his life, with the rifles already raised. You're standing in the snow of a public square in St. Petersburg, in a cold far below freezing, in the second rank of a line of prisoners, and an official with a clear, carrying voice has just finished reading out the manner of your death. It will be by firing squad, and it will be within minutes. A priest is moving down the line, holding up a cross for each man to kiss. Soldiers are drawn up in a rank with their rifles, and at the front of the square stand 3 bare wooden posts. You didn't know when they woke you in the dark this morning and brought you out that this was the day. You've spent the last 8 months in a stone cell in a fortress, alone, and you'd let yourself imagine almost any ending except this one. Now you're out in the thin, white morning light, and the arithmetic in front of you is simple and very fast. The men are taken to the posts in 3s, and you're in the second 3, which means that the moment the first volley is finished, it will be your turn a minute from now, perhaps less. The first 3 are walked to the posts. Long white shrouds are pulled down over their clothes, the loose smocks people are buried in, and caps are drawn over their faces. A drum starts up somewhere behind you. The soldiers lift their rifles and take aim at the 3 hooded men, and you understand, with your whole body and not only your mind, that you're watching the last thing you'll ever see. And here is the strange part. Your mind doesn't go blank, and it doesn't slow down. It speeds up, and it turns greedy. You realize you still have a whole minute left, and a minute has become an enormous, almost unspendable fortune, and you start trying to spend it well. A few seconds to say a silent goodbye to the men beside you, a few seconds to think one clear final thought, and then the rest, the largest and most precious part, simply to stand here and look. The low sun has caught something gilded on a rooftop across the square, and you can't stop looking at it. You get the oddly calm idea that in a few moments you'll pass into that light and become part of it, and the idea isn't entirely terrible. You don't pass into the light, because in the same instant, rifles up, drum running, the first 3 hooded at their posts, there's a commotion at the edge of the square, a rider, an officer, a paper held up and waving. The drum cuts off, and the official voice begins again, reading out a second document you had no idea existed. By the grace of the emperor, the sentence of death is commuted to hard labor in Siberia, exile, a ruined life, but not the posts, and not today. It had been theatre, the scaffold, the shrouds, the priest, the rifles, all of it had been staged on the direct order of the Tsar, who'd settled on the reprieve in advance and arranged for it to arrive at the last possible second. The terror was the real sentence, the execution was a performance, and the condemned were both its cast and its audience. One of them, a young man who'd stood in that first group at the posts, is said never to have recovered. He went out of his mind there in the square in the space of that single minute, and he did not come back. The man whose place you've been standing in was 28 years old. His name was Fyodor Dostoevsky, Fyodor Dostoevsky, and almost nobody knew it yet. One celebrated short novel a few years earlier, some later work that had landed less well, and then this. He'd been arrested for belonging to a circle of young men who met in the evenings to read books the censors had banned and to talk, with enormous seriousness and enormous hope about how Russia might be remade. The chief piece of evidence against him was that he'd read aloud to the group a forbidden letter. One writer's furious indictment of a country that owned its peasants like furniture, flogged men to death, and opened everyone's mail. What those young men believed deserves to be put at its strongest because it was neither foolish nor small. A set of bright new ideas had been arriving from the West. That human reason could redesign a society from the ground up, that the old authorities of church and crown weren't sacred but simply in the way, that a rational and just and equal world wasn't a daydream but something closer to an engineering problem, waiting for clever and determined people to solve. The young Dostoevsky believed a version of this, and not lightly. He thought it was the future, and he thought it was good. The man who walked off that square and into a Siberian prison camp came out years later as one of the most piercing writers who has ever lived, and he spent almost the whole of that writing life in argument with the bright young man he himself had been. The injustices that had moved that young man were as real as ever. He never once pretended otherwise. What had changed was that he'd come to suspect the bright ideas, followed all the way down, didn't arrive where they promised. He thought they arrived somewhere else, somewhere he'd brushed up against in the cold that morning and could never afterward leave alone. And the thing he'd brushed against was not death. He had survived death. It was the idea you've been holding since the dark at the start of tonight, the suspicion that if you pull down everything that has always held meaning up, the crown, the church, God, the whole inherited order, what you find underneath might be nothing at all. We know how that morning felt from the inside because of what he did with the evening. Back in his cell, alive, he wrote a letter to his older brother, and it remains one of the most luminous things anyone has ever set down a few hours after being marched out to die. It was the 22nd of December, 1849, the 10th by the old calendar Russia still kept. He doesn't rage in it. He grieves a little for all the time he feels he squandered being unhappy, and then he writes, more or less, "Life is a gift. Life is happiness. Every minute of it could have been an age of happiness, and I never once understood that until today. I'm not downcast," he tells his brother. "Life is everywhere. Life is in us, not outside us. You've felt a thimbleful of this yourself, almost certainly. The car that comes out of nowhere and somehow misses. The foot that slides on a wet stair and then, somehow, catches. For an hour afterward, the ordinary world is almost too bright to look at directly. The colour of a traffic light, the warmth of your own hands around a cup, the plain, outrageous fact of more time. For you and me, that hour fades by lunch." Dostoevsky walked out of that square with it switched permanently on, and it became the quiet engine under everything he wrote. A man who'd been handed his life back and who could therefore never again take quite seriously the idea that a life was worth nothing, which is exactly what makes the shape of his remaining years such a strange and useful clue. A man given that, the almost unbearable preciousness of simply being alive, might reasonably spend the rest of his time on earth savouring it. He did not. He spent it bent over the single idea that frightened him more than the firing squad ever had. The rifles had only threatened to end his life. The idea threatened something he found worse, to make it not matter in the slightest that he'd been spared. That isn't a fear with much grip on you at noon, when you're busy and useful and the day is holding you upright. It waits, the way it waited for him, for the quiet, for the cell, for the dark, for the hour when there's nothing left to do but lie still and let the larger questions back into the room. And the idea waiting there in the quiet was not his, and not really anyone's. It had a birthplace, his own country, a little further on in time, and it was just then being handed a name that strangely no one wanted at first, because it came into the world the way the most dangerous things often do, as an accusation thrown by one generation straight into the face of the next. Say the word nihilist now, and a particular picture tends to form. Someone slumped and checked out, a shrugging cynic who believes in nothing and so does nothing. Pale, ironic, faintly adolescent, the sort who announces that nothing matters and then orders another drink. Hold on to that picture for a moment, because the first people ever to be called nihilists were almost its exact reverse. They were the most fervent, disciplined, wide-awake young people their country had yet produced, and they put the fear of God into everyone over the age of 40, which was a particular kind of joke, since putting an end to the fear of God was more or less their life's work. The name had been let loose by a novel. In 1862, the Russian writer Turgenev published a story about a household quarrel, fathers and sons, he called it, that was really a quarrel between two generations, the warm, romantic, liberal fathers and their cold, scientific sons. He pinned on one of those sons a label the older men kept repeating in alarm, nihilist, from the Latin nihil, nothing. A man, as the book describes him, who bows to no authority and takes no principle on faith, however much reverence has gathered around it. Turgenev hadn't invented the word. It had drifted through earlier quarrels for decades. What he did was set it alight. Within a year or two, it had leapt off the page and fastened onto actual young men and women, who, instead of flinching, picked it up and wore it with pride. And they were not dropouts. They were the children of priests and small landowners who had decided, with all the ferocity of the newly converted, that the entire inherited furniture of Russian life, the church, the Tsar, the old manners, the poetry, The very idea of an immortal soul was so much fog standing between humanity and a better world. In its place, they set science, reason, biology, the dissecting table. They cropped their hair and wore plain, dark clothes like a uniform, the women cutting theirs short and going about unchaperoned, the whole generation turning its plainness into a provocation. They poured themselves into medicine and chemistry, into teaching peasants to read, into the rights of women, decades ahead of nearly everyone around them. Hold the sons up against the fathers and you see something uncanny, not a rejection so much as a reflection. The father's warm faith in God and beauty and Mother Russia came back in the sons as an equally total faith in matter and nerve and proof. The same flame in a mirror that flipped every value and kept all of the heat. Their gospel was a novel too, earnest, clumsy, and wildly influential, written by a young radical named Chernyshevsky, while he sat in a cell in the very fortress where Dostoevsky had once waited out his own trial. Its title asked the only question that seemed worth asking: what is to be done? And its answer rested on a philosophy that sounds at first almost gentle. Rational egoism, they called it. People always act in their own self-interest. That's simply human nature, a law as fixed as gravity. But most of us are too muddled or sentimental to see what our interest truly is. Teach us to see clearly, scientifically, and we'd find that real self-interest lines up neatly with everyone else's. A perfectly rational person would turn out to be a perfectly good neighbor, not from virtue, but from arithmetic, and a whole society of such people would settle itself, almost on its own, into something close to paradise. Chernyshevsky even gave that paradise a picture, a vast hall of glass and iron, all light and transparency, borrowed from the great exhibition palace that had recently gone up in London. To a generation starving for a future, the Crystal Palace became shorthand for heaven on earth, built by reason with no further need for God. This was the dream the man from the firing squad could not swallow. Dostoevsky was back from Siberia by now, 10 years older and with his own young radicalism burned out of him, and when he met the gospel of the Crystal Palace, he sat down and wrote a reply unlike anything before it, a short, cramped, furious book spoken to us by a nameless man from a basement. We call it Notes from Underground, and its narrator is some of the worst company in literature, spiteful, self-pitying, contradictory, sick. He is also, on the one question that concerns us here, very possibly right. His objection to the Crystal Palace is the strange and brilliant heart of the book. He grants that it would be comfortable, even kind. What he cannot forgive is that it would be a prison, a bright, clean, agreeable prison, and the more flawless it became, the more total the prison would be. Build the perfectly rational world, he says, and you abolish the one move that proves a person is more than a machine. The freedom to choose against your own advantage, to do the stupid, perverse, self-defeating thing for no better reason than that you chose it, and nobody, not even the formula, saw it coming. Strip that away, and a human being becomes what he calls a piano key, an object that sounds the correct note when the correct finger presses it, fully explained, fully predictable, and no longer, in any way that counts, alive. You know this move, even if you've never said it out loud. It's the diet you blow up the morning after it starts working, the sensible advice you refuse precisely because it's so obviously sensible, the small mutiny against the app that has optimized your route and your sleep and your spending and your steps. Somewhere in you, there's a holdout who would rather be wrong on purpose than right on schedule, and who, handed a life that runs perfectly, would feel an almost physical itch to put a foot through the glass. The underground man takes that small, stubborn itch and stands the entire dignity of the human person on top of it. 2 and 2 make 4, he sneers. Very well. But 2 and 2 making 5 is sometimes a far more charming thing, and a man will love it now and then, precisely because it is his. And yet look at what his freedom has actually bought him. He isn't happy. He isn't building anything. He's alone in a basement, nursing grudges and sabotaging the few people who try to come near him. Free, in the exact way a man is free who has nothing left to lose and no one left to lose it with. The same idea that gave the young nihilists their fire, tear down the false thing, refuse the comfortable lie, has curdled in him into something airless and stuck. One of their own slogans had promised that the urge to destroy was also a creative urge. The underground man is what you get when the destroying goes perfectly and the creating never arrives. This is the doubleness the word has carried ever since. Two faces of a single idea. One is the nihilist on the barricades, scientific, ferocious, certain that once the rotten old world is cleared away, a rational paradise will rise on the cleared ground. The other is the nihilist in the basement, who has cleared exactly the same ground and found beneath it not a foundation for paradise but a hole, and who can no longer quite see the point of standing up. They aren't opposites, they're the same suspicion caught at two different moments. That nothing is sacred, that nothing comes given, that it is all only us. One of them still glowing on the way down, the other gone cold at the bottom. Which of the two the idea really is underneath all its fire is a question the next century and a half would wear itself out trying to answer. It's a good question to take down into sleep with you. It's far older than you are, and it's in no hurry. It will keep until morning and long after. The underground man, for all his fury, only ever talked. He stayed below, shaking his fist at a paradise nobody had built yet. But the idea he was wrestling with had no intention of staying underground, safe in the form of an argument. Quite soon, in the mind of another of Dostoevsky's characters, it would climb the stairs, step out into a bright St. Petersburg afternoon, and reach for an axe. He has an axe under his coat, on a loop he stitched there himself, and he's climbing a back staircase toward an old woman's apartment in the heavy heat of a July afternoon. Hold him there on the stairs for a moment, because of all the ideas in this long story, the one that put him there is the strangest. It has no content, it builds nothing, promises nothing, commands nothing. It's pure subtraction, the quiet removal of a single assumption from the back of the mind. And yet, it's the only one of them that leaves bodies on the floor. He's a former student, clever, proud, and so poor he stopped eating with any regularity. And he has spent feverish weeks talking himself up these stairs. The money is almost beside the point. What's carrying him is the assumption he's taken out, and the theory he's built in the empty space where it used to sit. He's even written the theory down in an article with cool, academic confidence. Most people, he argues, are ordinary, raw material born to live inside the rules and keep the species turning over. But a rare few are extraordinary. The Napoleons, the lawgivers, the ones who carry humanity to its next word. And those few, precisely because they're delivering that new word, have the right to step over the old rules to do it, including, if it comes to that, the rule against shedding blood. Every founder of a new order, he notes, was a criminal under the order he replaced. History only calls them great afterward. It's a more familiar fantasy than we like to admit. The flattering little suspicion that the rules are really meant for other people, that you, specifically, might be the exception. But notice the trap he's built and can't see from inside it. What's actually driving him up these stairs is not the truth of the theory, but something more personal and more frightening. Which kind of man he is. He needs to know whether he's one of the rare few or just another louse, and there's only one experiment that will settle it. So the murder is almost beside the point as a crime. What it really amounts to is an exam he's set himself with a single question on the paper. Which kind of man am I? He passes, in the narrow sense. He swings the axe, the old woman dies, her gentle, simple-minded sister walks in at the wrong moment, and he kills her too, which was never part of the plan. And then the theory, so clean on the page, runs into the one thing it had no column for, his own nature. He doesn't feel like a Napoleon, he feels sick, and he feels split. His very name, Raskolnikov comes from a Russian word for a schism, a thing cracked down the middle, and over hundreds of pages he comes apart, feverish and raving, drawn helplessly back toward the scene and toward confession, unable to live a single week inside the permission he'd granted himself. The argument was never refuted, it simply couldn't be survived. His conscience turned out to be older and deeper than his philosophy, and it would not sit down and be reasoned with. Raskolnikov is the idea in its crude personal form, one lonely young man wondering whether the rules apply to him. But Dostoevsky spent the next 15 years tracking the same idea down to its root, and at the bottom of it, in the last and greatest of his novels, The Brothers Karamazov, he set a far more formidable man to carry it, Ivan. Ivan is not a starving student with a grudge, he's brilliant, generous, clear-headed, and the part that unsettles, genuinely good. That's exactly what makes him dangerous, because Ivan has thought the whole thing through, thought it through honestly, and arrived somewhere terrible by the most respectable road there is. His reasoning starts not in arrogance but in compassion. Ivan cannot accept a world in which children are made to suffer. He collects the true cases, the beaten and the tortured and the abandoned, and he decides that no future paradise, no final harmony in which everything is forgiven and explained could ever be worth the tears of one tormented child. If the price of admission to heaven is agreeing that it was all somehow worth it, then Ivan, very quietly and very courteously, hands back his ticket. He won't go in. It's one of the most moral refusals in all of literature, and it carries him, by one further step, to the most dangerous thought in the book, that if there is no God and no immortal soul, no eternal life in which the scales are finally made even, then there's no real reason, none that truly holds, to be good at all. Virtue without immortality, Ivan says, has nothing underneath it, and in that case, everything is lawful. You may know that line in a sleeker form. If God does not exist, everything is permitted. It's among the most quoted sentences in modern thought, and it gets hung around Dostoevsky's neck almost every time. The small, strange truth is that he never wrote it. Not in those words. You can search the novel and never find that tidy slogan anywhere in it. What you find instead is messier and more careful. The idea always tied to immortality rather than simply to God, always spoken by a character rather than declared by the author and carried by that older, heavier word, not permitted, but lawful. The polished version everyone repeats was sent into the world more than 60 years later by a French philosopher named Sartre, who borrowed it to launch a movement and, in the borrowing, quietly turned it inside out. In Dostoevsky's hands, it had been a warning, the description of an abyss. In Sartre's, it became a banner, the announcement of a thrilling new freedom. The same short sentence can be a scream or a flag, depending entirely on who's holding it. Then Dostoevsky does the cruelest and most honest thing in the book. He shows you what the idea does once it leaves the clever man's mouth and walks out into the world. Ivan has a half-brother, a servant in the house, sly and resentful and overlooked, who listens to all that brilliant talk and takes it with deadly literalness. If everything is lawful, then nothing forbids killing the father. Both of them have good reason to hate. So the servant does it, and afterward, he explains himself to Ivan with a terrible calm. You are the real murderer here. I was only the instrument. You taught me. I was simply the one with the nerve to follow your logic where it led. Ivan, who never touched the old man, who would have recoiled from the act in horror, is told to his face that the blood is on his hands, and the verdict lands. He cannot carry it. He breaks down into fever and hallucination, visited by a shabby little devil who is only his own mind come loose, because the one thing his airtight philosophy never accounted for was that ideas don't stay in the room where they're spoken. They walk out and they find hands. Anyone who has said a cruel thing as a joke and then watched it land on someone who took it to heart knows the faintest version of this. And notice that Dostoevsky never answers Ivan with a better argument. He seems to have believed no argument could win, that on the level of pure logic, Ivan is unbeatable. His only reply is a scene. In a poem Ivan invents and recites, Christ returns to earth and is promptly arrested by an old inquisitor who lectures him at length, coldly and almost tenderly, on why people never really wanted the unbearable gift of freedom he'd offered them. They wanted bread and certainty and someone to obey. And to the whole magnificent indictment, Christ answers nothing at all. He simply crosses the cell and kisses the old man on his bloodless lips. Dostoevsky meets the unanswerable argument with a presence instead of a proof, with the wordless hunch that whatever holds a person back from the edge was never a proof in the first place and so can't be argued away. It lives somewhere the logic doesn't reach, in a face, in shame, in love, in the part of you the syllogism never gets to, which sets the whole question down in your lap where Dostoevsky wanted it. Lift it out of the novels and ask it plainly about yourself. Suppose Ivan is right. Suppose there's no eternal judge keeping the books, no one, anywhere, who will ever know, no ledger where any of this is finally written down. Tonight, in this room, with the lamp throwing its small circle of light and the rest of the house gone dark, ask it honestly what would still hold you. Not what should hold you, not the answer you'd give out loud to someone else. What actually would, if every watcher were gone and the only one left to face was you. Maybe you find something down there, solid, that doesn't need an audience, or maybe you don't. Either way, it's worth knowing, and it's the kind of thing that only surfaces this late, in the quiet, with no one around to perform it for. It isn't a question you'd have thought to ask at noon. Dostoevsky lived on that fault line his whole life, but he never quite said aloud what had cracked to open it. He kept the old word, God, and let his characters lose their hold on it one at a time. It would take someone else, a few years on, in another country, with no novel to hide behind, to say the thing flatly, and to grasp that before everything could become permitted, something first had to die. And the thing that had died was God. The man who finally said it out loud was a sick, half-blind German with a great drooping mustache and almost no readers. A dazzling young professor until his health broke in his 30s, after which he drifted from one cheap boarding house to the next across the Alps and the Italian coast, writing in pencil in the gaps between migraines. His name was Friedrich Nietzsche, and unlike Dostoevsky, he hid behind no characters. What he thought, he said in his own voice, on his own account. And yet when he came at last to this particular thing, the thing Dostoevsky's people had only ever circled, even he couldn't bring himself to set it down as a plain sentence. He reached instead for a little scene and buried it in a book with an oddly bright title, The Gay Science, the old troubadour name for knowledge with a song in it, which only makes the passage, when you reach it, land harder. He wrote a Madman. It's a clear morning in a market square, stalls, gossip, the small ordinary commerce of a town, when a man comes running into the middle of it with a lit lantern swinging in his hand, which is the first strange thing since the sun is already high. He's looking for God, he shouts. Where is God? Where has he gone? And the people standing around, most of whom, as it happens, don't believe in God at all, find this delicious. Did he lose his way? Like a child? They laugh. Did he wander off? Emigrate? Is he hiding? They're having a fine time. A morning's entertainment has arrived on its own 2 feet. The madman halts. He looks at them, and his look goes straight through the laughter. Where is God? He says. And then he tells them, we have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. And then he keeps going, and the laughter dies in their throats because the man is not gloating at all. He is grieving. Where has it gone? He cries. Where are we moving now? Away from all our sons? Aren't we falling backward, sideways, in every direction at once? Is there even an up or a down anymore? Hasn't it gotten colder? Isn't more and more night coming on so that we have to light lanterns in the morning just to see across the square? God is dead. God remains dead. and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? The unsettling thing the scene does, if you let it, is turn around and find you in the crowd, because the madman isn't only haranguing a marketplace of strangers a century and a half ago. We have killed him, you and I. You're in there too, whatever you happen to believe, because the killing he means was never an act of will that anyone performed on purpose. It was something a whole civilization did slowly, almost absent-mindedly, with its left hand, while its right hand was busy reaching for something else, for science, for progress, for comfort, for the thousand bright, useful things that gradually made the old belief at the center quietly impossible to hold, all of which is worth sitting with, because it is very nearly the opposite of how the line gets used today. Pull up that famous phrase now, God is dead, and it tends to arrive with a smirk, a small flag planted by someone pleased to have outgrown the whole arrangement, checked the attic, found it empty, case closed, on with the afternoon. The cheerful unbelievers in the marketplace are that smirk, exactly. They are the people Nietzsche built the scene to frighten, because the madman's entire point is that they have no idea what they've done. They gave up believing in God the way you'd cancel an old subscription, a minor bit of housekeeping, without noticing that the thing they'd cancelled was the flaw beneath every value they still hold dear. That is what he meant by the death of God, and it isn't really a statement about God at all. He isn't taking a census of heaven and reporting it empty. He's describing something that has happened to us, to a whole civilization, without our quite registering it. That the belief which used to sit at the center and hold everything else in its place has become unbelievable, and that everything which leaned on it is therefore already falling, whether it knows so or not. For most of Western history, the reason a promise bound you, the reason cruelty was wrong, the reason a life had a shape and a direction and not merely a length, all of it ran back in the end to one source. Pull the source out and the values don't blink out overnight. They hang in the air a while, like a wall with nothing behind it, still perfectly wall-shaped, but they've quietly lost the thing that made them more than tastes. Nietzsche thought this was the most dangerous misunderstanding of his age, and he was savage about it. The respectable thinkers around him had given up God with enormous relief, and then turned and insisted, more earnestly than ever, that naturally we'd all go on being kind and fair and decent. To him, this was like sawing through the branch you're sitting on and expecting to stay in the air. Christian morality, he argued, was never a freestanding list of nice behaviors that merely happened to come boxed with a religion. It was a single structure, thought out all of a piece, and the belief in God was the keystone. Knock that stone out and you don't get to keep the arch, you get rubble, even if the rubble holds its shape for a generation or two, out of sheer habit, so that no one quite notices the building has already come down. And that is where it stops being about the 19th century. You may even remember the day you felt it in yourself, some belief you were handed as a child that quietly stopped being true for you, with no crisis, just a soft click, after which life went on precisely as before, except that the floor under that one room had gone, and you'd somehow kept living in the room anyway. Most of us live in the whole arch like that now. Whatever we say, we believe. You are sure, all the way down, that it is wrong to be cruel to someone weaker than you, sure in a way that feels less like an opinion and more like a fact about the world, as solid as the hardness of a table. That every person matters, that a promise should hold even when no one is watching. These are good things to be sure of. But ask where the certainty actually comes from, what makes them true and not just deeply felt. And for a great many thoughtful people now the honest answer is a kind of blank. We kept the furniture. We're simply no longer sure who built the house or whether it stands on anything at all. Nietzsche refuses, at this point, to be the gloomy prophet everyone files him under. He held two things about this at once and would not let go of either. On the one side, it was a catastrophe. The earth unchained from its sun, the long cold falling the madman saw coming. On the other, in his more daring hours, it was the most tremendous opening. With the old sky gone, he wrote, the horizon looked free again. The sea lay open. Ships could finally sail out. Not relief. He never once offered relief, but a dangerous, exhilarating freedom for anyone strong enough to stand in it without flinching. He would not collapse the two into one tidy verdict. The death of God was a wound and an opening, a killing frost and an open sea, and the only honest place to stand, he thought, was in the cold of both at once, refusing the comfort of choosing, which is more or less where the marketplace left his madman, lantern still burning in the daylight. I have come too early, he says. My time is not yet. This enormous thing is still travelling toward them, and they did it with their own hands. It's an easy thing to keep at arm's length in daylight, this falling, this missing floor. The day is full of handholds, the work, the people, the 100 small certainties that hold you upright by the elbows and never once ask what they're standing on. It's here, in the dark, with the handholds let go of one at a time, that the madman's question finally gets a hearing. Not as an argument, but as a sensation in the body. The small lurch of a stair that isn't where your foot expected it. The open-air dizziness of standing exactly where the floor used to be. And then, if you stay with it a moment longer, something stranger still, the discovery that you are not, in fact, falling, only floating, only waiting in the cold and the dark to learn which way is down. Lost in the dark is exactly what the man who wrote that Madman was not. This is the thing almost everyone has backward about Nietzsche, and it's worth straightening out because it changes what the whole story is about. In the popular imagination, he's nihilism's poster boy, the wild-haired prophet of nothing matters, patron saint of every clever teenager who has decided the universe is empty and announced it at the dinner table. And that is very nearly the reverse of the truth. Calling Nietzsche a nihilist is a little like calling an oncologist a cancer. Nihilism was his diagnosis of the age, the sickness he spent everything he had trying to find a way through. He didn't come to celebrate the death of God, he came to ask how a human being might survive it. So how did the doctor end up mistaken for the disease? 2 reasons, both of which happened after he could no longer defend himself. The first is a book. If you've ever seen Nietzsche quoted as the philosopher of the will to power, it was very likely from a volume by that name, and that volume is not a book Nietzsche wrote. It's a heap of notes, scraps from his private notebooks, assembled and arranged and given that thrilling title after his mind had collapsed by other hands. Chief among those hands belonged to the second reason, his sister, Elizabeth. Elizabeth was a German nationalist and an anti-Semite, married to another of the same, with whom she'd once sailed off to found a whites-only colony in the jungles of Paraguay. When Nietzsche broke down for good in his mid-40s, collapsing in a street in Turin and living his last decade unable to think or speak clearly, she took control of everything he'd written and everything he was about to become. She built him a shrine, curated his image, and steered his reputation steadily to the political right. After her death, the archive she'd built took money from the Nazi state. Hitler himself came to her funeral. And so the man got handed down to the 20th century as a prophet of the master race. The bitter joke in all of this is that Nietzsche loathed exactly these people. He had broken with the composer Wagner, partly over Wagner's anti-Semitism. He broke with Elizabeth herself over the man she married. His letters spit contempt at the nationalists and Jew-haters of his day. And the famous frightening phrase, the will to power, meant something almost opposite to what the jackboots made of it. Not a license to dominate other people, but something closer to self-overcoming, the drive to master the resistance in your own nature and make something of yourself. The people he held up as powerful were artists and thinkers, and the rarer sort who had the discipline to become who they really were, not a conqueror among them. His sister built the vehicle that carried the lie. Others later drove it the rest of the way. Clear that wreckage away, and you can finally see the actual idea, which is sharper and stranger than the myth. Nihilism, for Nietzsche, was never a single thing. It came in two kinds, and everything hangs on telling them apart. There's passive nihilism, which is what most people mean by the word. You lose the old certainties and you sink. You want less. You expect less. The fire goes out of you and you settle into a comfortable numbness, asking nothing large of life because nothing large seems possible. And then there's active nihilism, which takes the very same loss and does the opposite with it. It picks up a hammer and goes after whatever dead values are still standing, not to wallow in the rubble, but to clear the lot. The death of God is a demolition either way. The only question is whether you sit down in the ruins or stand in a cleared space on the threshold of something you might actually get to build. The figure that truly frightened Nietzsche was a much gentler one than the hammer-wielding destroyer, the soft, contented end state of passive nihilism, which he gave a name that still lands like a slap: the last man. Picture the most comfortable life imaginable, scrubbed of every risk and every hardship. The last man has his little pleasure for the day and his little pleasure for the night. He's careful with his health. He's never poor and never rich, because both would take too much effort. He's given up longing for anything, given up creating anything, given up the kind of love or ambition that might cost him something. He takes a little poison now and then for pleasant dreams, and a lot of it at the end, for a pleasant death. "We have invented happiness," he says, and he blinks. And here is the part that chilled Nietzsche most. When this future is described to the crowd as a warning, the crowd doesn't recoil, it cheers. "Give us that," they shout. "Make us into the last man." You can feel the temptation yourself anytime the whole machinery of modern life offers to sand the friction off your days, every discomfort outsourced, every edge rounded, the feed tuned to keep you mildly pleased and never once disturbed, good vibes only, forever. The opposite of that blinking creature was the figure Nietzsche actually hoped for, the one he called the Übermensch, the overman, badly mistranslated ever since as some kind of master race. He meant something much harder and much lonelier, a person who could stand in the cleared ground where the old gods used to be and create their own values from scratch and live by them and mean it. He had learned this whole fight at the feet of the man he'd once idolized. As a young man, Nietzsche had fallen under the spell of Schopenhauer, the great pessimist, who taught that underneath the pretty surface the world is just blind, hungry striving, a will that wants and is never satisfied, and that to be alive is therefore to suffer more or less without end. Schopenhauer's conclusion was a kind of dignified surrender. Since wanting is the source of all the pain, the wise person learns to quiet the wanting, to deny the will, to step off the wheel of craving into stillness. It was the noblest version of giving up ever written, and Nietzsche worshipped it and then spent the rest of his life turning against it because he came to believe the master had drawn exactly the wrong conclusion from the right premise. Yes, the world is will. Yes, it brings suffering. No, there's no God to redeem it. But the answer to that, Nietzsche decided, was not to want less, but to want more, to say a tremendous yes to the whole of it, the agony included, and to live more fiercely, not less, which leaves us with an uncomfortable answer to the question we started with. Was Nietzsche a nihilist? The honest reply is that at the moment of demolition, the active nihilist and the passive one are impossible to tell apart. Both have torn the old world down. Both are standing in the same field of broken stone with the same empty sky overhead. The whole difference is in what happens next, whether the rubble turns out to be a grave or a foundation. And that difference doesn't show up in the wreckage. It shows up later in the building or the not building. There's a real relief in that, if you let yourself feel it. The man who named your dread, who saw the cold and the falling more clearly than anyone, did not lie down in it. He thought you might not have to either. Let that settle into the body for a moment, the way good news settles, the shoulders, the jaw, the held breath you didn't know you were holding. But he was too honest to leave it there as a slogan. Anyone can say create your own values. Saying it is nothing. The hard part, the part that keeps people up at night, is whether a value you invented yourself could ever weigh as much as one handed down from heaven, whether you can really be bound by a rule you wrote. For that, Nietzsche devised a single test. It was the heaviest thing he could think to put on a human soul, and he meant it to sort, once and for all, the ones who could truly say yes from the ones who were only talking. The test arrives as a question, and Nietzsche wrote it down not as an argument, but as a scene, so the only honest way to meet it is to let it happen to you. Some night, the loneliest night you've had, the house dark, you about as alone as you ever get, a demon slips into the room. It doesn't threaten you. It leans close and tells you one plain fact about the way the world is built. This life you're living, it says, this exact one, the life you actually have, you will live again. Not a better draft of it, not the good parts only, but this very one, in every detail. Every joy and every ache, every humiliation you'd give a year of your life to undo, this exact moment, the dark, the weight of the blanket, the sound of your own breathing, all of it will come back to you in the same order down to the smallest thing an infinite number of times, and there'll be no rest between the runs, no gap, no version of you standing outside to notice the seam. The hourglass of your existence will simply be turned over and turned over forever, and you turned with it, a speck of dust in the glass. Then the demon asks its one question and waits. Would you throw yourself down, it says, and grind your teeth and curse me for telling you? Or is there any chance, even once, on your best day, that something in you would answer the other way? You're no demon, you're a god, and I have never heard anything more worth hearing. Before anyone answers, it helps to be clear about what that question actually is and what it isn't. In his private notebooks, Nietzsche sometimes tried to argue the thing might be literally true, that in a universe with only so much matter and endless time to shuffle it, every arrangement, including this one, including you, would have to come round again and again. The argument doesn't really hold up, and, tellingly, he never published it. What he published instead was The Demon, not a proof, but a dare. Scholars still argue about which he meant more, the physics or the dare, and I won't pretend to settle it for you. The strange part is that it hardly matters. Whether or not the cosmos actually loops, the question does its work the instant it lands, because what it measures was never the universe. It's you. The demon's question is really a mirror. It tells you nothing about the stars. It tells you, with a clarity you can almost never get at directly, the one thing hardest to see straight on, how you actually feel about the life you're in. Hold it up, and your reaction is your reflection. The flinch of someone secretly running from their own life, or the steadiness of someone who has, against all odds, arrived inside it. And the reason the mirror is so merciless is that the demon won't haggle. Most of us, asked the question honestly, would take the deal with amendments. Keep this, delete that, fix the one terrible year. But there are no amendments. It's the whole thing or nothing, because a life isn't a list of separable events you can sort into keep and discard. It's one connected thing, and the parts you'd cut are holding up the parts you'd keep. Nietzsche had a name for the rare condition in which you could meet that demon and bless it. He called it amor fati, Latin for the love of fate, and he was careful about the word love. He didn't mean putting up with your life or accepting it through clenched teeth the way you accept bad weather or wearing a brave face over the wreckage. He meant something far harder and stranger, actually loving what happened, all of it, the necessary and the unbearable together, wanting nothing to have been otherwise, not one thread, not forward and not backward and not for all eternity. The idea of an existence that returns and returns was not even new. Older traditions had pictured exactly this, a great wheel of being that turns, and for most of them it was a sentence to be served, a prison the wise soul learns to escape. Nietzsche took the identical wheel and did the most audacious thing anyone has done with it. He asked you to fall in love with it. You don't actually need a demon to feel the edge of this. You felt it on an ordinary Tuesday, the commute that is every commute, the inbox that refills itself overnight, the small machinery of a life turning over with a faint sense that you've done all this before and will do it again, when something quiet in you asks, almost idly, is this it? Is this all there is? That whisper is the demon's question in miniature, knocking politely instead of breaking in. The recurrence just takes the whisper and makes it enormous and makes it inescapable and refuses to let you look away. And here is the part of the test that has teeth. The life you'd be asked to will back forever is not the curated one. It includes the grief that nearly finished you, the failure you've never told anyone about, the love that ended badly. Those aren't blemishes on an otherwise good life, the kind of thing you could file off and discard. They are load-bearing. The person sitting here in the dark tonight, the one being asked the question, was built as much by the worst things as by the best, and to wish the worst away is to wish away the self that's doing the wishing. That's the cruelty in it, and also, if you can bear it, the strange consolation that nothing in your life, not even the ruin, turns out to be wasted, because all of it went into making the only person who could ever be asked. So let the demon ask you, here, tonight, with the house quiet and no one to perform an answer for, this life, this room, everything that carried you to this exact minute, the good and the broken both, coming back forever with not one thing changed. Don't reach for the clever reply. Just notice what your body does when the question lands, the small flinch or the unexpected unclenching, because the body answers a half second before the mind can dress the answer up. And on this particular question, the body doesn't lie. Whatever it does, you don't have to settle the matter tonight. You can carry the question down into sleep and let it go on working in the dark, the way the heaviest questions do, turning slowly over and over like the hourglass while the rest of you rests. Only notice what the demon quietly took for granted and what you took for granted along with it, that the whole drama is about whether you can say yes, as if the one thing between you and peace were your own nerve. The demon never mentioned the room it was standing in. It said nothing about the universe that holds your one looping life, whether that universe is listening, whether it cares in the slightest what you decide, whether there is anyone out there to hear the yes at all, once you've finally found the courage to say it. That silence on the far side of the question is the older and the larger thing. It was there long before anyone thought to send a demon to ask, and it will still be there in the morning, no matter how you answer. You've looked up on a clear night somewhere away from the city and felt it, the small cold drop in the stomach when the sky stops being a ceiling and turns into a depth. For a few seconds, the everyday scale of things falls away. The deadline, the unanswered message, the argument you're still half having in your head. And what's left is the plain, staggering size of it all, and you, a warm speck on a cooling rock, looking up into a silence so wide that the word silence barely reaches it. A man named Blaise Pascal, felt exactly this 3.5 centuries ago and wrote down what may be the most honest sentence anyone has ever written about it. The eternal silence of these infinite spaces frightens me. Pascal was no mystic fleeing from science. He was one of the great mathematicians and physicists of his age, a man who helped found the study of probability and built one of the first machines that could calculate. He understood the new universe about as well as anyone then alive, and it was precisely because he understood it that it frightened him. What had changed in his lifetime and the generations just before it was the size of the sky. For most of human history, the cosmos had been a snug arrangement. The Earth at the warm center, the stars hung close overhead, the whole structure built around us and watched over from just beyond the outermost sphere. Then Copernicus and the astronomers who came after him quietly pulled the Earth out of the middle, and the walls of that cozy house fell away in every direction at once. The Earth turned out to be a minor planet circling an ordinary star, adrift in spaces that seemed to have no edge, no center, and no particular interest in the small creatures clinging to one of the specks. Pascal stood right at the lip of that vertigo, and unlike most people since, he refused to look away from it. Then he did the thing the terror seemed to demand. He leapt. If the universe out there was silent and cold and offered no answer, then the answer, Pascal decided, would have to come from elsewhere. From God, reached not by proof, but by a wager of the heart. You can't reason your way to faith, he argued, but you can notice that you're forced to bet your life one way or the other, and that betting on meaning costs you little and might gain you everything. So he bet. He filled the silence with faith because he could not bear to leave it empty. Most of us no longer do that, and it's worth being clear-eyed about why. It isn't really that we checked the heavens and found God gone. It's that, in the centuries since Pascal, we got astonishingly good at the universe, so good that we very nearly stopped hearing the silence at all. A German thinker named Max Weber, a little over 100 years ago, gave the condition a name, the disenchantment of the world. He meant that we now live inside the deep assumption that there are no mysterious, incalculable forces out there, that anything, in principle, can be measured, predicted, explained, and mastered if we only push hard enough. And he granted that this is a kind of triumph. We have mapped the genome and weighed the galaxies and traced the whole cosmos back to its first hot fraction of a second. But Weber saw the strange price folded into the victory and stated it as plainly as anyone has. Science can tell you, to an absurd number of decimal places, how the world is. It cannot tell you, in a single syllable, what any of it is for. It will hand you the mass of the sun and the age of the light now reaching your eye and the precise chemistry of the tears on your face. And on the one question that actually keeps you awake, whether any of this matters and if so why, it has nothing to say and was never built to. You can run the experiment the night sky is always quietly running on you. Take whatever looms largest in your mind right now, the worry you carried to bed, the thing you have to face tomorrow, the whole weight of your one life, and then pull back from it, past the roof, past the weather, past the thin blue skin of the air, until the earth is a marble, and then a pinpoint, and then nothing you could find. Pull back past the sun, one of a few 100 billion in this galaxy alone, and past the galaxy, one of perhaps 2 trillion. Pull back through the time as well as the space. The rock you're lying on is 4.5 billion years old. The light from some of those stars set out before there was a single eye on Earth to catch it, and the universe will keep going, cooling and spreading and thinning for a stretch beside which the entire human story is one struck match, lit and gone. Somewhere in that long pulling back, the worry you began with doesn't get answered. It simply stops being visible. And then you blink and you're back inside your body, in your room, and the worry is precisely the same size it always was. And so, for that matter, are you. And this is where the question can turn, if you let it. We keep tipping our faces up and asking the universe what it all means, and we keep meeting that enormous silence, and we keep reading the silence as a verdict, as though the cosmos had heard us out and answered no. But look again at what's actually in front of you. In all of it, the trillions of galaxies, the freezing distances, the billions of years before you and the far longer stretch after, there is exactly one place, as far as anyone has ever found, where the question "what does this mean" so much as occurs. It occurs here, in the speck, in the small, warm, ridiculously complicated thing lying in the dark, built out of the same burnt-out stardust as the stars themselves, that has somehow folded back far enough on itself to look at the whole and ask what it is for. The silence isn't the universe withholding an answer. It's only what space sounds like, because meaning was never out there to be found, not the way mass and distance and temperature are out there. Meaning was never a property of the cosmos at all, it's a property of a creature asking. And that asking is, on everything we know, the rarest thing there is, rarer than galaxies, which are everywhere, rarer on the evidence so far than life. The silence you keep straining to hear an answer inside is the sound of being. For now, the only thing anywhere that is even putting the question, which is a lonely thing to be. It is also, if you turn it slowly enough in the dark, very close to the most astonishing. So maybe the silence was never the failure we took it for. We may have been asking the wrong listener the whole time, lifting the question up to the sky and demanding meaning from the one place that was never going to hold any, the way you might call a question down into a canyon and mistake the echo for a reply. Some questions the universe will simply never answer because they were never addressed to it in the first place. And here, right at the edge of sleep, with the day's noise finally run down, that stops feeling quite so much like being abandoned. It starts to feel a little more like being left, at last, alone with the question, which is a different thing and a kinder one. If there's a window near you, look at it for a moment. The dark on the far side of the glass, and beyond it, if the night is clear, a few of those old lights still arriving. Some left their stars before you were born. 1 or 2 set out before anyone was. You're lying here taking in light from things that may not even exist anymore in a room gone quiet, and the silence out there has a way, this late, of seeping in under the door. Because there's a second silence, it turns out, not the one in the infinite spaces, but a nearer one that opens inside a person in the dark when nothing in particular is wrong, when all the day's handholds have been let go and there's suddenly nothing left to do but be here. That inner silence has a terror of its own and a strange gift of its own, and a man who came not long after Weber gave his whole difficult life to describing what it has to show us. You know the feeling, even if you've never had a word for it. It comes at 3 in the morning usually, when you wake for no reason and lie there in the dark. Nothing is wrong. There's no bill you forgot, no real threat in the room, no specific thing your mind can point to and say that's what I'm afraid of. And yet there it is, a low, formless dread, a sense that the bottom has quietly dropped out of everything, that the whole arrangement you call your life is somehow stranger and more precarious than it looked at noon. By morning, it's gone. The day rushes back in with its tasks and its handrails, and you forget you ever felt it. But here is the unsettling possibility a German philosopher spent his life on, that the dread at 3 in the morning is not the distortion we take it for, that the daytime confidence is the distortion, and the dread is the one stretch of the day when you're seeing the situation as it really is. His name was Martin Heidegger, and the first thing he did with that feeling was insist on a distinction we usually blur. There's fear, he said, and there's something else, and they're not the same animal. Fear always has an object. You're afraid of the dog, of the diagnosis, of losing the job, of the stare in the dark. Fear points at a thing, and if you remove the thing, the fear goes with it. But the 3 in the morning feeling points at nothing. Try to name what you're afraid of and you come up empty-handed, because there is no object, no single thing in the world that's the problem. Heidegger kept the old German word for it, which English borrowed, angst. And the objectlessness, he argued, isn't a flaw in the feeling, it's the entire point. The reason you can't find the thing you're afraid of is that you're not afraid of anything. You're afraid, for once, of the whole. And here I have to stop myself because I'm using a word that has come to mean something very specific and very different. When we say anxiety now, we usually mean a medical condition, a racing heart, a clinical diagnosis, a real disorder that deserves real treatment, and not a philosophy lecture. Heidegger is not talking about that, and it matters not to confuse them. He isn't describing a malfunction of the nervous system. He's describing a mood that he thought every honest person passes through, a clear-eyed encounter with the strangeness of existing at all, closer to a kind of sobriety than to a kind of panic. If your 3 a.m. is the medical kind, this chapter is not a diagnosis of you, but most of us, medicated or not, have also felt the other thing, the quiet philosophical kind. And it's that one Heidegger was after. So sit with the quiet kind for a moment, the way he asks you to. In ordinary life, the world is a dense web of things that matter. The coffee matters because you want it. The meeting matters because of your job. The job matters because of the rent, and on, everything leaning on every other thing, the whole web holding itself up. What happens in angst is that the web goes slack. All at once, the things stop mattering. Not one of them, all of them together. The coffee, the meeting, the rent, your plans, your name. For a moment, none of it has any grip, and it all slides away into a kind of equal, weightless irrelevance. And in the space where all that mattering used to be, something shows up that you almost never see directly because it's usually hidden behind the busy web of things. What shows up is the sheer, dumb, astonishing fact that there is anything here at all, that you exist, that the world exists rather than nothing. Heidegger gave that the strangest name in modern philosophy. He called it the nothing, and he said the nothing does something. It annihilates, he wrote, which sounds like mysticism but isn't. He only meant that when everything slides into irrelevance, the sliding away itself is an event, a pressure, and it pushes you back, hard, against the bare fact of your own existence. The dread, in other words, isn't empty at all. It's a door, and on the far side of it is the oldest question there is: why is there something rather than nothing, asked not in a seminar, but in your own body, in the dark? Behind the anxiety, Heidegger thought, stands the one fact we spend the most energy not looking at, that you are going to die. Not in the abstract, everyone knows people die. He meant your death, the specific one with your name on it, the single event so completely yours that no one can take it from you or do it for you. In day-to-day life we hide from this inside what he called the they, the anonymous crowd, the chatter, the general one. One dies, we say. People pass away. It happens to everyone, which is exactly the trick, because everyone is never me, not yet, not really. Heidegger's unnerving prescription was to stop hiding, to live with your own death in plain view, not morbidly, but as the honest horizon of your life. Because a strange thing happens when you do. The knowledge that your time is finite and unrepeatable is the only thing that makes any of it weigh anything at all. The same finitude that terrifies you is what gives your choices their gravity. Own your death, and you finally own your life. And here is where the ground gets genuinely uncomfortable, and I don't think it should be smoothed over. The man who wrote so piercingly about owning your own life, authentically refusing to dissolve into the anonymous crowd, that man, in 1933, joined the Nazi Party, took a position of authority under it, and gave speeches in its support. The philosopher of not surrendering yourself to the they surrendered himself spectacularly to one of the worst days in human history. Scholars have argued about it ever since, how deep it ran, whether he ever truly regretted it, whether the philosophy is poisoned at the root or merely betrayed by the man. I won't pretend to settle that for you, but you can hold a true thing and a damning fact in the same hand, and you probably should. The insight about the dread can be real even if the man who found it failed his own hardest test, maybe especially then. There's one more move Heidegger made that bears directly on everything we've followed, and it's the most disquieting in the chapter. He turned and looked back at Nietzsche, at the whole brave project of creating your own values to replace the dead God, and said, in effect, Friedrich, that was never the cure. That was the disease arriving at its final stage. Think about what Nietzsche actually proposed. The old ground of value collapses, and the human being steps into the empty center and declares himself the new source, the one who decides what's worth what, the will that posts the values. But to Heidegger, that's not escaping the abyss. It's the abyss wearing a crown. The whole world has now been reduced to raw material for human valuing, worth exactly what we decide and nothing in itself, and a human being who has made himself the measure of all things has not found solid ground. He's just stopped noticing that he's still falling. Nietzsche, on this reading, isn't the man who overcame nihilism at all. He's its last and proudest prophet, which leaves you tonight holding both halves of a single strange thing. The dread at 3 in the morning empties the world of meaning. That's the wound, and it's real. Nothing in the web matters. The whole arrangement goes weightless and cold, and the very same event, the very same emptying, is what hands your existence back to you as undeniably, nakedly your own. That's the gift, and it's also real, and it arrives in the identical breath as the wound. Heidegger never told you which one to feel. He thought the honest thing was to feel both at once and not to reach too quickly for the lamp. So maybe that's the one practical thing to carry out of all this, into exactly the hour you're most likely to need it. The next time you surface at 3 in the morning into that formless dread, the bottom gone, the world strange, nothing you can name, you might try, just for a breath or two, not treating it as a thing that's gone wrong with you. You might let it be what he thought it was, not a malfunction, but a kind of visitation. The one time in the long day when the noise drops far enough that you can hear the bare fact of your own being, humming there underneath everything, the way it always was. You don't have to do anything with it. You can just notice it and let it hold you for a moment, the strange familiar weight of being someone at all, and then, when you're ready, let yourself drift back down. Jean-Paul Sartre worked at a corner table in a Paris cafe, chain-smoking, writing for 10 hours at a stretch in the noise and the clatter. He looked, in other words, like the opposite of a man lying awake at 3 in the morning in a silent room. And he took the same groundlessness that had left Heidegger reverent and trembling and did almost the reverse with it. Where the dread had said hold still and behold, Sartre felt something with more kick to it. Not a void to stand in awe of, but the lurch in the stomach that's half terror and half release. His most famous line is a small piece of grammar that turns the entire Western picture of a human being inside out. Existence, he said, precedes essence. To feel how strange that is, take an ordinary object, say a paper knife, a little blade for slitting open envelopes. Before that knife ever existed, someone had the idea of it, a tool for opening letters, made of such a metal, shaped a certain way for a certain use. Its essence, what it is and what it's for, came first in the mind of its maker, and only then was the knife produced to match. Its purpose precedes its existence. And for most of Western history, Sartre pointed out, we quietly assumed the same was true of us. There was a maker, God, who held the concept of human being in mind, complete with a nature, a purpose, a design, and then made us to fit it. Essence comes first, existence second, and we arrive already meaning something. But take the maker away, Sartre said, and the order flips. There is no prior blueprint of you, no design you were built to satisfy, no purpose stamped in at the factory. You simply exist first. You show up, thrown into the world, a kind of blank, and only afterward, through everything you do, does it get decided what you are. You are not a knife made for a purpose. You're a thing that exists first, and then has to invent its own. Sartre felt the full weight of this before he could argue it, and he poured the feeling into a novel, into a man named Roquentin, who is slowly being overtaken by a strange sickness. It isn't a flu, it's a way of seeing. One afternoon, Roquentin is sitting in a public park, looking at the root of a chestnut tree shouldering up out of the ground, and the sickness arrives in full. Ordinarily, a root is a tidy thing. You see it, your mind files it under root, hangs its name and its uses on it, and moves on. But sitting there, the labels begin to peel off. The word root slides away from the thing, and the thing's usefulness slides away with it, and what's left is just this, a dark, knotted, swollen mass of existence, there for no reason, justified by nothing. That did not have to be, and simply, obscenely, is. Roquentin calls the feeling nausea, and it isn't really about the root at all. It's about the discovery that everything is like the root, that nothing in the whole world has to exist, that it's all just here, unnecessary, leaning on nothing, including him, including you. Once you've seen it, he says, you can't unsee it. The solid furniture of the world turns out to be floating. Almost everyone half remembers the next move, usually with the hard part quietly filed off. The popular Sartre is the bumper sticker, you create your own meaning, and people tend to say it the way you'd offer a small gift to yourself. Make your own meaning, follow your dreams, you do you. But that's only the soft daylight half of what he meant, and he'd have found the bumper sticker almost funny because the very same idea, looked at squarely, is one of the more frightening things you can say to a person. If there's no blueprint, then there's also no excuse. Every "I had to" you've ever leaned on, I had no choice, it's just who I am, that's how I was raised, anyone would have done the same. Every one of those is, on Sartre's view, a small lie, because you always have a choice. Even doing nothing is a choice you're making, and you own it. He called this being condemned to be free. Condemned because you never asked for it and you can't put it down. Free because nothing outside you is actually holding the pen. No God to take the responsibility, no fixed nature to blame, no script to follow, just you, choosing every minute and answerable for all of it. He had a name for the lie too, bad faith. Bad faith is the everyday art of pretending you're not free, of treating yourself as a settled thing, a role, a type, a set of circumstances, so you don't have to feel the weight of choosing. His famous example is a cafe waiter, a touch too crisp in his movements, balancing the tray a shade too precisely, performing waiter so completely that he can almost believe that's all he is. Not a free human being who has chosen this morning and every morning to do this, but simply, helplessly, a waiter, the way a stone is a stone. We all do it. It's restful to be a thing. A thing doesn't have to decide. You can feel the obvious objection rising, and Sartre felt it too. If there's no blueprint and no God and no excuse, if you really can choose anything, then doesn't anything go? Couldn't you choose cruelty as freely as kindness? Sartre insisted the answer was no, that in choosing for yourself you somehow choose for everyone, holding up a picture of how a person ought to be. But the argument came out thinner than the problem deserved, and on some level he knew it. He never quite built the ethics his own freedom needed. That work would be done, and done more rigorously, by the woman who shared his life and his cafes and thought harder than he did about what we actually owe one another. But that is a thread for later in the night. Lie with all this for a moment, here in the dark, where there's no role to perform and no one to perform it for. And notice how the question you came in with has quietly changed shape. You started out asking whether this freedom is a gift or a sentence. And somewhere in the thinking that stopped being the right question, because freedom isn't a possession you have to be weighed as good or bad. It's just the bare fact of you choosing with nothing underneath. The question that's left lying on the floor is smaller and much harder. If you really are nothing but the sum of what you actually do, not what you intend, not what you tell yourself, not who you privately feel you are inside, but only what you do, then who exactly have you been making all this time without admitting that you were the one making it? You don't have to answer that tonight. It's too big for the small hours, and answering it is the work of a life, not an evening. Let it go for now. Feel the bed under you, the plain weight of your body lying still, doing nothing, choosing nothing, allowed for once to simply rest. And yet even here, notice that the resting is itself a small choice you keep making, second by second, to stay, to breathe, to let the day finally go. Every real choice carries that strange double weight, the lightness of being free and the drop in the stomach of knowing it's yours and no one else's. There's a name for what it feels like to stand right at the lip of a choice that big, with no proof it's the right one and no one who can make it for you. The believers have always called it a leap. So here is a question reason can't answer for you, which is exactly the kind Kierkegaard cared about most. You've followed an argument as far as it goes. You've weighed the evidence, both sides honestly, and then it runs out. It stops a little short of the thing you actually have to decide, the way every real argument eventually does, leaving a gap between where the proof ends and where your life still has to go. What do you do in that gap? Do you stand there forever, refusing to move until certainty arrives, which it never will, or do you jump? Søren Kierkegaard, Søren Kierkegaard, was a strange, brilliant, melancholy Dane who lived a short life in Copenhagen in the first half of the 1800s, writing under a small army of invented names, as if no single I could hold everything he had to say. The condition he wrote about most relentlessly under one of those names is one he thought nearly everyone is in without knowing it. He called it despair, though he didn't mean ordinary sadness, but something more structural, almost geometric, a self that has come loose from the thing it was meant to be anchored to. In his picture, a human self isn't a simple thing, it's a relation, a balancing act, held in tension between opposites, between the finite and the infinite, the body and the dreaming mind, the life you actually have and the endless lives you can imagine. And that balancing self, he said, is not self-supporting. It was made by something and it comes to rest only when it rests transparently. That's his word, in the power that made it, in God. Take that anchor away and the self doesn't simply carry on. It goes quietly wrong, it spins, it can't find the floor. Most people, he thought, live their whole lives in exactly this state, a low and unnoticed despair, papering it over with busyness and distraction, and never once asking why the ground never feels entirely solid underfoot. And the cure, Kierkegaard thought, is the one thing reason can never hand you, faith, and not faith in the thin modern sense of believing certain facts, which he was scornful of, the notion that you could reason your way to God like solving a sum. He meant a leap, a passionate, whole-bodied commitment, made precisely where the evidence gives out, to trust the thing you cannot prove. His great image for it is the most disturbing story in the Bible. Abraham commanded by God to take his only son up a mountain and kill him. A reasonable man refuses. A moral man refuses. The act is insane and monstrous by every standard we have. And Abraham, this is Kierkegaard's knight of faith, goes anyway, not because he has stopped loving Isaac, but because he trusts, against all reason, against the evidence of the raised knife, that somehow it will be all right, that he will be given his son back. Kierkegaard had a phrase for that impossible trust. He called it believing by virtue of the absurd. For 100 years, that stood as one of the most powerful answers anyone had given to the silence. When reason runs out, leap, and let the leap land you in something that can hold you. And then, a century later, a young Frenchman picked up Kierkegaard's leap, turned it over in his hands, and called it a kind of cheating. Albert Camus agreed with nearly every step that led up to the leap. Yes, the universe is silent. Yes, we ache for a meaning it refuses to give. Yes, reason runs out. He called that gap, between our hunger for sense and the world's refusal to supply it, the absurd, and he believed the only honest place to live was right inside it, eyes open, taking no comfort that isn't true. Which is exactly why the leap, to him, was a betrayal. The person who leaps has felt the full weight of the silence, and then, at the last second, flinched. Rather than stay in the hard, clear truth of the absurd, they invent a soft landing, God, eternity, a hidden purpose, some reason to hope smuggled in precisely where the honest answer was that there is no reason. Camus had a savage name for the move. He called it philosophical suicide. Not the killing of your body, but the killing of the one thing that had made you honest, your willingness to look at the silence and not blink. The lepers, he said, deify the very thing that crushes them and find a reason to hope in exactly what should have taken their hope away. There's a strange music in the fact that both men built everything on the same word. The absurd, for Kierkegaard, was the door, the impossible thing you believe your way through into the arms of God. The absurd, for Camus, was the room you must never agree to leave. One treated it as a threshold to be crossed, the other as the one honest place left to stand. The same word and two opposite lives built on it. The duel won't resolve, and I'm not going to pretend to resolve it for you because the honest truth is that nobody has. You can't run this experiment from the stands. The leap is the kind of thing you can only understand from inside the decision. And you already know it from inside because you've been making smaller versions of it your whole life. Every time you've trusted a person you couldn't be sure of, every promise to stay that you made knowing you couldn't guarantee tomorrow, every path you've committed to with no proof it was the right one, those are leaps. You couldn't reason all the way to the far side. At some point the evidence ran out and you went anyway, or you didn't, and you stayed safe on the near edge and called it being sensible. And here is the part Kierkegaard understood better than anyone. You cannot take a leap halfway. A leap with one foot still on the ground isn't a leap. It's a man crouching, hedging, keeping his options open, which is its own quiet version of the despair he was trying to cure. So the duel ends in a standoff that has held for more than a century, with no referee on the field. Kierkegaard leapt and called it faith and lived a life lit from somewhere the rest of us can't quite see. Camus refused to leap and called it honesty, and you can feel the cost of that refusal in every line he wrote. Both of them looked into the same silence. Both staked an entire life on their answer, and the unnerving thing is that you can't prove either one wrong from the outside. You can only find out in the end which kind of person you are, not by arguing it, but by what you actually do when you reach your own edge and the proof gives out and there's no one standing there to push you or to catch you. That isn't a thing to settle tonight. It's a thing to carry down into sleep and back up into the morning and into the next real choice you have to make without a map. Sleep tends to be kinder to it than argument ever is, and yet a refusal all on its own is just a door slammed shut, a no with nothing behind it. If Camus had only ever said, "Don't leap," he'd be a footnote. What made him matter? What made him the unlikely source of one of the few genuine exits anyone has found in this whole long story is what he built in the space where the leap would have been. A way of living, fierce and clear-eyed and somehow joyful, with the silence left exactly as silent as he found it. To show you what that way of living looks like, Camus reached past philosophy and into myth, to a figure the ancient Greeks invented as a portrait of the most pointless existence imaginable. So put yourself in his place for a moment. You have been condemned by gods you can't appeal to a single task, forever. There is a boulder and there is a mountain. You set your shoulder to the rock and push it slowly all the way to the summit. Hours of straining, the whole dumb weight of it against you. And at the top, the instant before you can rest, it rolls back down to the bottom of its own accord, and you walk down after it, and you begin again. Not for a year, not for 1,000, forever. The gods, when they designed this punishment, reasoned that there is nothing on earth more terrible than labor that is useless and without hope. Camus called that gap between your need for the task to mean something and the universe's flat refusal to let it, the absurd. Not absurd the way we throw the word around now to mean silly or ridiculous, but the specific collision between a creature that hungers for sense and a world that gives back only silence, the same silence we've been circling all night. And his whole interest in Sisyphus is in one particular moment most people skip over, not the straining uphill, but the walk back down. That stretch when the rock has rolled away and Sisyphus turns and descends the mountain to start over, empty-handed, his task undone, nothing accomplished, a pause before the next futility. Camus calls it the hour of consciousness, because in that moment Sisyphus knows he sees his fate whole, with no illusion that it leads anywhere or that the gods will ever relent. And it's precisely there, Camus says, in that full knowledge that something strange becomes possible. And then comes the move that has kept the little essay alive for 80 years. Camus says that Sisyphus, walking down, fully aware of the absurdity of his task and choosing to keep at it anyway, without hope and without appeal, is superior to his fate. He is stronger than his rock. The gods handed him meaningless labor to break him, and instead he takes the one thing they can't reach. He owns it. He looks at the boulder and says, "In effect, this is mine. The struggle itself is enough." And Camus ends the essay with one of the most quoted and most misread sentences in modern thought. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Now, this line needs handling with care because it gets passed around like a fridge magnet, a little hit of "you can be happy anywhere" positivity. That is not even close to what Camus meant. There is nothing cheerful in it. Sisyphus is not happy the way a person is happy on holiday. His happiness is the grim, lucid, almost terrible satisfaction of a man who has looked his pointless eternity dead in the eye, refused to lie to himself about it, refused to escape into either hope or death, and found in that refusal that the rock has become his, the mountain his, the whole absurd business his own and no one else's. It's closer to defiance than to joy, the happiness of an unbroken man. And the reason this lands, the reason it isn't merely a story about a mythological strongman, is that you have a rock. Most of us do. There's some version of the uphill push and the rolled back stone in nearly every life. The commute that resets every morning. The inbox that fills as fast as you empty it. The house that won't stay clean. The same arguments, the same Mondays. The slow Sisyphean labour of keeping a life and a body going, all of it undone by nightfall and waiting for you again at dawn. Camus isn't asking you to pretend that's not what it is. He's asking whether you can do the one thing Sisyphus does on the walk down, see it clearly without flinching, and still, somehow, claim it as yours. It's a beautiful answer, and it has moved a great many people, and it's worth hearing the sharpest objection to it, which came from a quiet American philosopher named Thomas Nagel, about 30 years later. Nagel looked at Camus's heroic Sisyphus and gently called it overwrought. "Think about what defiance actually requires," he said. "To shake your fist at a meaningless universe, to stand on the mountain and refuse to be broken, you have to be taking the whole thing terribly seriously. You're still treating the absence of cosmic meaning as a great enemy worth battling, which is itself a sneaky way of pretending it matters enormously that nothing matters." And that, Nagel thought, was the very last illusion to let go of. If you really follow the thought all the way down, if there's no view from the stars on which any of this counts, then your own meaninglessness doesn't count either. Even the absurdity isn't a tragedy. So why clench your fist at it? The right response, he thought, wasn't heroism or despair at all, but irony, a wry, almost amused acceptance that we are creatures who can't help taking our small lives seriously, while also seeing, from one step back, how arbitrary the whole performance is. A faint, knowing smile, and then back to your life. So now you have two very different faces for the same situation. Camus, up on the mountain, jaw set, refusing to be defeated, magnificent, and maybe, as Nagel suggests, protesting a little too much. And Nagel, a step back, smiling faintly at the cosmic joke, lighter and cooler, wiser maybe, and maybe also a little bloodless, a little too comfortable, missing something of the dignity in Camus' refusal to go quietly. One of them treats your life as a battle to be fought with passion. The other treats it as a joke to be gotten gently. And it is genuinely not obvious which one is the grown-up in the room, the fist or the smile, the defiance or the shrug. People who have thought hard about it land on both sides. and you may find that which one rings true to you tonight depends mostly on how tired you are and on how much, just now, the weight of your own rock is pressing down on your shoulder. You don't have to pick a side tonight, but you might, lying here, try the smaller and more personal experiment hiding underneath the whole argument. Tomorrow there will be a rock, some piece of your life that resets, that you'll have to push again with nothing to show for yesterday's pushing. When you reach it, the alarm, or the stairs, or the same first task, see if you can meet it for just 3 seconds the way Sisyphus meets his, not with a slogan, not with forced gratitude, but with the plain, clear, open-eyed recognition that this is yours, that no one is making you push it but you, and that the pushing, pointless as it is the actual texture of being alive. Whether what rises in you in that moment is Camus' defiance or Nagel's quiet smile, I honestly can't tell you, and I'm not sure it matters much which. Either one is a way of staying in the room with your own life instead of fleeing it. Either one is a way of refusing to be broken by a rock. For now, though, the rock can wait. It isn't going anywhere. It never does. That's the whole point of it. The room is dark, and you are not on a mountain. You're lying still in a quiet space with nothing to push and nowhere to climb, and you can let the shoulder that's been braced against the boulder all day come all the way down. Rest is its own small refusal of the gods, but notice before you drift off that everything we've followed so far has been about one person and one rock, a private piece made in solitude on a mountain with no one else on it. The trouble starts when there's more than one of you on the slope, because the same lucid freedom that lets a man claim his own rock and bow to no god and no rule can just as easily be turned outward. And a man who has decided that nothing is forbidden and that he answers to no one stands only a short step away from deciding that he may do anything at all to anyone who gets in his way. Camus had watched this happen, not as a thought experiment, but as the history of his own century. He had lived through the Nazi occupation of France, through the camps, through the slow revelation of what was being done in the Soviet prison system in the name of a better tomorrow. A century in which everything is permitted had stopped being a line in a novel and become, twice over, official policy, with the corpses to prove it. And so, he sat down to write the book that frightened him most to write, a book built around the one question the absurd had left dangerously open. Once you've thrown out God and the old rules, once you've seen that the universe forbids nothing, what, if anything, stops you from killing? If Sisyphus is free on his mountain, what stops the free man from becoming a murderer? His answer is one of the most surprising turns in the whole story, because it doesn't come from a commandment or a god or any rule handed down from outside. It comes from inside the act of rebellion itself. Picture the oldest scene of revolt there is. A slave who has obeyed his entire life, swallowed every order, taken every blow, and who one day, for reasons he couldn't fully explain, reaches a line and says, "No, no further, not this." What is actually happening in that moment? On the surface, he's refusing for himself. But look closer, Camus says, and you find something larger smuggled inside the refusal. When the slave says this should not be done to me, he is appealing, without quite realizing it, to a value, a sense that there's a way human beings simply should not be treated, a line that shouldn't be crossed. And that value isn't his alone. It belongs, by its very nature, to everyone. The slave's no is secretly a yes to a dignity he has just discovered he shares with every other person, including, in the end, his master. This is what Camus meant by his famous reworking of Descartes. Descartes had said, "I think, therefore I am," one mind alone proving its own existence. Camus answered, "I rebel, therefore we are." The moment you genuinely rebel against an injustice, you've already let everyone else in. You've staked your claim on a value that only makes sense if it covers all of us. And here is the part that does the real work, the part that answers the murderer's question. If your rebellion is grounded in the dignity of every person, then it cannot, without betraying itself, turn around and trample that same dignity in someone else. A no with all of humanity folded inside it can't be used to justify slaughtering part of humanity. Rebellion done honestly carries its own break. Camus called it la mesure, measure, limit, proportion, the built-in boundary that keeps a justified no from curdling into anything goes. This was not an abstract position for him, and it cost him the most important friendship of his life. When The Rebel came out, with its argument that revolutionary violence, which forgets its own limit, becomes simple murder, it landed like an insult on the French left, and on Jean-Paul Sartre, who by then had thrown in his lot with the communists and was prepared to justify a great deal of present bloodshed in the name of a future paradise. The way this gets told is usually flattened, so let me straighten it out. Sartre didn't simply attack the book himself. He had a younger colleague, Francis Janson, write a long, scornful review in Sartre's own journal, dismissing Camus as a soft moralist who didn't understand history. Camus, wounded, replied with an open letter addressed coldly over Janson's head to the editor, to Sartre himself. And Sartre answered in print with one of the most devastating things one friend has ever written to another, a public, surgical dismantling that opened with terrible tenderness, "My dear Camus." The two never spoke again, and yet, a coda worth keeping, when Camus was killed in a car crash 8 years later, Sartre, who had not said a word to him since, wrote an obituary of surprising warmth, praising his old friend's stubborn humanism, the very thing the whole quarrel had been about. Even the bitterest rupture in modern philosophy ended in the end in something like respect. Sartre had the rhetorical victory, but the deeper answer to the whole problem, the rigorous ethics that could actually ground Camus' instinct about the limit, was being written quietly by the person closest to Sartre of all, Simone de Beauvoir. Simone de Beauvoir. Sartre's own freedom, you'll remember, had seemed to permit anything. He gestured at an ethics to rein it in and never built one. Beauvoir built it. In a short, formidable book, she took the exact premise everyone feared: no God, no given values, total freedom, and showed that it does not lead to anything goes, for a reason almost the same as Camus's, but tighter. Your freedom, she argued, is not a private possession you exercise alone in a sealed room. It only means anything in a world full of other free people. Your projects, your values, your whole life reach out into a future that only other free human beings can carry forward, which means you cannot coherently will your own freedom while crushing theirs. To treat another person as a mere thing, to foreclose their freedom, that, for Beauvoir, is the one genuine evil, the cardinal sin of a godless world. Without a God to excuse us, she wrote, we are totally and inexcusably responsible for ourselves and for one another. You don't have to be on a barricade for any of this to be live. You draw these lines all the time, in miniature. There's the moment in the meeting when something crosses a line and you hear yourself say, quietly, "That's not okay," and feel, in the saying, that you're not only defending yourself, but standing up for a rule that ought to hold for anyone in your seat. That small no has the whole structure in it, a value, a limit, other people folded inside. And you've probably also felt the failure Camus and Beauvoir were warning about, the moment a righteous no loses its measure and tips over into cruelty. The pile-on that started as justice and became a mob, the cause so sure of itself that it stopped seeing the human being on the other end. That tipping point, where a real grievance forgets the shared dignity it was standing on and begins to trample it, is exactly the line they spent their lives trying to mark. A thin line of light, faint but real, that says, this far, in the name of the thing you're defending, and not one step past it. Notice what's happened along the way to the question you carried in at the start of all this. It began, hours ago, as the most frightening thing the most dangerous idea could say. If nothing is sacred and no one is watching, then everything is permitted. And here, by way of a slave's refusal and a broken friendship, and a quiet woman's rigorous little book, it has turned into a different question altogether, a smaller and far more human one. Not, is anything forbidden? But what would you refuse to do, even to win? Where, in your own life, is the line you wouldn't cross even for a cause you were certain was right? The point past which the victory wouldn't be worth what it cost to get there? You may not be able to put it into words, but there's a real warmth in discovering that it's there at all, that your own no, when you reach for it, turns out to have another person hidden inside it, and another, and finally everyone, that even here, with the old rules gone, you were never quite as alone or as unbound as the idea had promised. It's a strange thing to feel at this hour, with the house asleep and no one for miles to say no to, no injustice in the room to refuse. And yet this might be the hour you feel it most clearly, the bare shape of it with all the daytime arguments stripped away, that somewhere under everything, even now, you are tied to people you will never meet by a handful of lines you would not cross. The mind tends to find those lines in the dark when it isn't being asked to defend them, only to notice, quietly, that they are there. Everything we've followed so far has been a story of loss, a ground that used to be there, God, a cosmic order, a built-in human purpose, and then the slow horror of watching it dissolve, and the long, brave, exhausting work of trying to build something to stand on out of the wreckage. All of that, the dread, the falling, the missing floor, assumes one thing, that there was once solid ground and that losing it is a catastrophe. But there is an entire tradition of human thought, older than any of the names we've used tonight, that looked at the very same groundlessness, no fixed self, no permanent essence, nothing to stand on that doesn't shift, and did not panic. It had been there the whole time, on the other side of the world, quietly insisting that the thing the West was mourning had never actually existed, and that noticing this was not a disaster. It was the beginning of being free. Start where that tradition starts, with the man we call the Buddha, around 2,500 years ago in northern India, and start by clearing away the thing almost everyone in the West believes about him, which is close to the opposite of what he taught. The popular image of Buddhism is a kind of gentle nihilism. Life is suffering, want nothing, empty yourself out, dissolve into the void. That is not it. The Buddha was, in fact, fighting on two fronts at once, against two opposite errors he thought equally false. On one side stood the eternalists, who believed in a permanent, unchanging soul that lives forever. On the other stood the people he called the annihilationists, and annihilationism is, almost exactly, the ancient name for nihilism. The belief that when the body dies, the person is simply snuffed out, that there is nothing of consequence underneath, that it all comes to nothing. The Buddha rejected that view as firmly as he rejected the eternal soul. His whole teaching was pitched as a middle path between the two, not eternal somethingness, not blank nothingness, but a third thing the West has had enormous trouble even hearing. That third thing is the strangest and most freeing idea in the tradition, and you can feel your way into it with a small experiment, right now in the dark. Go looking for the self that's been so frightened all night, the solid you the void was supposedly going to swallow. Try to actually find it, not your name, not your body, not your passing thoughts and feelings which arrive and leave on their own schedule, but the fixed, unchanging thing underneath them all that owns them, the real you that's been there since childhood and will be there at the end. Look for it directly. What you find when you look closely is that you can't quite catch it. There are thoughts, sensations, memories, a body, a long river of changing experience, but no still point at the center holding it all, no little permanent self sitting behind your eyes. The Buddhists have a name for this, anatta, no self. Not that you don't exist, you're obviously here, reading, breathing. But the you who is here is not a fixed thing at all. It's a process, A verb the language keeps trying to turn into a noun, and here something quietly turns over. That feeling people dread. I don't know who I am anymore, the one that arrives in a divorce, a lost job, a long night like this one. The sense that the solid self has come loose. The Buddhist tradition would say you're not malfunctioning at all, you're seeing correctly, possibly for the first time. There was never a fixed self to lose. The looseness you're feeling isn't the ground giving way. It's the discovery that there was never any ground of that kind, and that you've been swimming, not falling, the whole time. 600 years later, a philosopher named Nagarjuna took this insight and built it into one of the most rigorous bodies of argument anyone has ever produced. And I want to stress rigorous because the Western habit of treating this material as misty Eastern mysticism gets it exactly backward. Nagarjuna argues like a logician by relentless step-by-step demonstration. His central concept is the one the whole chapter turns on: emptiness. And the single most important thing to grasp about it is that emptiness does not mean nothingness. When Nagarjuna says a thing is empty, he means it is empty of one specific thing, empty of what he calls own being, an independent, self-contained essence that would let it exist all by itself, needing nothing else. Nothing, he argues, has that. A wave is empty. There is no wave essence, only water, moving, shaped by wind and shore and moon. You are empty. There is no you essence, only a life arising moment to moment out of a billion conditions you never authored. Empty doesn't mean the wave isn't there. It means the wave is nothing but its relationships, that it exists fully and vividly, precisely by not being separate, which flips the whole picture the West has been agonizing over. The Western nihilist looks at the loss of independent, self-grounded meaning and sees a void. Nothing left, nothing solid, the horror of the empty. Nagarjuna looks at the exact same absence of independent essences and sees the opposite. Not a void, but a world so densely connected that nothing in it can stand alone. Empty and full, for him, are the same word seen from two sides. A thing is empty of separateness precisely because it is full of everything else, and he was sharp enough to see the danger we've been circling all night, that emptiness, misunderstood, becomes the worst kind of nihilism. He says so directly in a line that could serve as the motto of this entire film: emptiness wrongly grasped is like a snake seized by the wrong end. Held correctly, it sets you free. Held wrong, it turns and bites. The most dangerous idea, even here, carries its antidote and its poison in the same hand. There's one more figure worth meeting because he is the place where these two worlds actually touched. In the 20th century, a Japanese philosopher named Nishitane read Nietzsche closely, carried Zarathustra around as a young man, and felt the full European abyss, the death of God, the cold nihility, all of it, from the inside. And then he did something neither side had quite managed. He agreed that the abyss is real. He agreed you have to fall into it. There's no going around. But he said the Western nihilist makes one subtle, fatal mistake at the bottom. He treats the nothingness as a kind of thing, a dark void sitting out there, set against the world of beings, and so he stays trapped, staring across at his own emptiness in despair. The trick, Nishitane said, is to keep going, to let the very nothingness empty out in turn, to negate even the void, and come through to the other side, where the nothing is no longer a thing you're staring at, but the open clearing in which everything you'd lost comes flooding back, vivid, exactly itself, finally, let be. The same abyss, in the end, he just refused to stop halfway down it. And it isn't only the Buddhists. Centuries before any of them, in ancient China, a Taoist named Zhuangzi arrived at the lightness from a completely different direction, not through logic, but through jokes and parables. There's a tree in one of his stories so gnarled and twisted and useless that no carpenter will ever cut it down. And Zhuangzi points out that this is exactly why it grows ancient and huge and free, spreading its shade over everyone who passes, alive precisely because it was good for nothing. Stop demanding that your life justify itself by being useful, by adding up, by meaning something in particular, and a strange freedom opens. You get to be the useless tree. You get to just grow. So here, near the end of the long night, the question you came in with can be turned all the way over. You arrived asking some version of how do I survive the emptiness? How do I get through the void, build a floor, find a ground? And these traditions between them ask a quieter and more radical question back. What if there was never anything to survive? What if the emptiness you've been bracing against your whole life was never a hole you're about to fall into, but simply the open space you've always been living in? The room itself, not a trapdoor in its floor. Notice, if you can, what your body does with that. Somewhere in the chest or the shoulders there may be a small letting go, the loosening of a knot you didn't know you'd been holding, the grip you've kept without realizing on a solid ground that was never under you and that you turn out not to need. Your breath can go a little deeper now. The self that was so frightened is already thinner than it was an hour ago, already half dissolved into the dark and the quiet, the way it dissolves every single night when you fall asleep, which is, when you think about it, the most ordinary act of letting go there is. It would make a fine place to rest the whole question, but the Western mind, having lost its old certainties, has never been content to simply be soothed. It keeps one more tool in its hand, the coldest and sharpest of all. The analytic knife that doesn't ask how you should feel about meaning, but whether any of it is even true. Set the emptiness aside for a moment, and the loosened knot, and the softly dissolving self, because there's a harder, drier question still waiting, and it will not be charmed by a parable about a tree. It asks with no warmth at all, when you say that something matters, really, truly matters, are you stating a fact about the world, or only reporting the weather inside your own head? There's a clean way to get at that question, devised about half a century ago by a philosopher named Robert Nozick. He offered people a choice. There is a machine. You can float in a tank, electrodes feeding your brain, and it will give you any life you could want. Every success, every love, every pleasure, rendered so perfectly you could never tell it from the real thing for the rest of your days. You'd never know you were in the tank. The only catch is that none of it would be real, and once you're in, you stay in. Would you do it? Most people, asked this, recoil. No, they say, and they say it fast, with a kind of instinctive certainty. Nozick thought that quick no told us something important, that we don't only want the experience of a good life, we want it to be true. We want to actually do the things and not just feel as if we did, to be a real person and not a body in a tank dreaming it's one, to be in contact with something outside our own skull. The refusal seems to prove we value reality itself over and above the pleasure it brings, which looks, at first, like solid ground under the whole idea of meaning. There's more to what matters, the machine suggests, than how it feels, but the picture cracks the moment you turn it around, which is exactly what a philosopher named Philippe de Brigard did. Don't ask whether you'd plug in, he said. Ask the opposite. Suppose you woke tomorrow and a technician told you, gently, that your entire life so far, your job, your family, your memories, has been the machine, that none of it was ever real, and that you can, if you like, unplug now into your actual life outside the tank, which you've never seen. Would you pull the plug? Here, most people hesitate and then say no. They'd stay. They'd keep the life they have, unreal or not, which is quietly devastating, because it suggests the noble-sounding answer we gave the first time might have had nothing to do with loving reality. We didn't refuse the machine out of any craving for truth, but because it was strange and new and not what we already had. Flip the familiarity and the preference flips with it. What we were actually defending, both times, wasn't reality at all. It was the status quo, whatever we happened to be holding. Then again, and this is the honest caveat, Maybe the second scenario is just bewildering in its own right. Being told your whole life was fake is a special horror, and refusing to leap into a total unknown isn't obviously the same thing as bias. The experiment doesn't settle it, but it plants a doubt, and the doubt is hard to shake. And that doubt is the doorway into the coldest room in this whole house. Because if the thing you call real might just be the thing you're used to, then maybe the thing you call valuable is the same. Not a feature of the world you're discovering, but a habit you're mistaking for a discovery. This is the case made more relentlessly than by anyone by an Australian philosopher named J.L. Mackie, who opened his most famous book with 5 of the bluntest words in modern philosophy: there are no objective values. Mackie's argument is worth following because it's sharper than the usual teenage version of nothing matters. He doesn't deny that we have moral feelings or use moral words, or that some things genuinely horrify us. His claim is about what those words are secretly claiming. When you say cruelty is wrong, he argues, you're not just expressing a distaste the way you might say you dislike the cold. You're saying something far stronger, that the wrongness is out there, in the act itself, a fact about the world that would hold whether or not anyone felt it, and that somehow reaches into any rational mind and commands it, do not do this. And then Mackie asks the awkward question. What kind of thing would that even be? A fact that isn't merely true but obligating, that doesn't just sit there like the mass of a stone but grabs you and pushes you, built right into the fabric of reality. There is nothing else in the entire universe like that. He called such values queer, strange beyond belief, unlike anything we otherwise know to exist. And his conclusion is a quiet bombshell. When we make moral claims, we are all, every one of us, sincerely saying something false. We reach for a fact that was never there. He called it the error theory, not the theory that you should do wrong, but the theory that the whole way we talk about right and wrong rests on a mistake. And the part people always miss is the part that makes the idea stranger than its reputation. Mackie was not telling you to go wild. He titled the book Inventing Right and Wrong, and his entire second half is about how we should build a working morality, precisely because the universe didn't hand us one. How, since right and wrong aren't discovered, they have to be made, carefully, as a human project for human reasons. Mackie himself lived, by every account, a decent and ethical life. The error theory isn't a permission slip, it's a claim about the deep status of a thing we're all going to keep doing anyway. Which points at the genuinely puzzling thing in this whole debate, not whether nihilists turn into monsters, because mostly they don't, but the strange gap between the seminar and the street. You can become convinced on a Tuesday afternoon that there are no objective values anywhere in the cosmos, and then walk outside and be just as unable as anyone to watch a child be hurt, just as bound by your promises, just as moved. The argument changes the story you tell about your values. It barely touches the values themselves. Still, plenty of serious philosophers think Mackie is wrong, and their defences are worth hearing because the stakes could hardly be higher. Derek Parfit, perhaps the most careful moral philosopher of the last century, spent his final decades on exactly this, and he laid out what's at risk with brutal clarity. If there really are no truths about what matters, he wrote, then nothing matters, not just morality, but anything. There'd be no reason to choose one thing over another, and the universe would contain no rational beings, only animals running on impulse. Parfit could not accept that, and he argued Mackie had set a trap with the word queer. Yes, moral facts aren't like rocks or electrons, but neither are the truths of mathematics, and nobody thinks 2 + 2 makes 4 is just a feeling or a fact built into the fabric of space. Some truths are real without being physical objects out there to bump into. Maybe what matters is like that, not queer, just not made of atoms. And Christine Korsgaard offered a different rescue, closer to home. Value, she argued, doesn't have to be found lying around in the universe, because we are the ones who confer it. A reflective creature that steps back from its own desires and asks, "Should I?" is already in that very act creating the thing it's looking for. The dignity you can't quite locate out in the world is real because you and creatures like you keep conferring it on yourselves and on one another. So the trial ends the way the honest ones do, without a verdict. The prosecution is genuinely strong. No one has ever actually found an objective value lying around, and the queerness of it is real. The defense is genuinely strong too. The alternative, that nothing whatsoever matters, is almost impossible to actually believe, and the mathematics comparison is hard to wave away. Scholars still argue about it. They even argue about what Mackie himself really meant. And maybe that's the most honest thing to notice about the whole question of whether anything is truly, objectively valuable. That it may not be the kind of question that wants a verdict at all. It isn't waiting to be solved so you can stop thinking about it. It's the kind of question whose whole worth is in the asking, in being carried, kept open, kept honest, refusing both the cheap yes of pretending you've proven that things matter and the cheap no of pretending you've proven they don't. You don't have to close it tonight. You almost certainly can't. So carry it down into sleep, unsolved, the way you've carried the others. It's good company, a question like this. It asks nothing of you except that you not lie to yourself about it, and know that it's no longer just a thing for seminar rooms and dense books with footnotes. This idea that maybe nothing is really, objectively, woven into the world valuable, left the lecture hall a long time ago. It has been seeping for 200 years down out of the philosophy and into the culture, and out of the culture and into the water, until it has arrived finally somewhere very specific and very close, in an ordinary person lying awake in a quiet room, holding a glowing rectangle in the dark, feeling without quite knowing why that none of it seems to add up to anything. That ordinary person is, of course, probably you, maybe even right now, or some night very like this one. The phone is the last thing in the room still giving off light. You told yourself you'd put it down 20 minutes ago. Your thumb keeps moving anyway, pulling the feed down, refreshing it, and what comes up is the usual flood. A war, a wildfire, a politician lying, a stranger's perfect vacation, an ad for something to fix a problem you didn't have until you saw the ad. None of it requires anything of you. And there's nothing you could do about most of it even if it did. And under the scroll, so quiet you barely register it, runs a low, flat feeling, not sharp enough to call despair, more like a dimmer switch turned down on the whole world. Whatever, none of it matters. And the strangest part is that the feeling doesn't even land as a crisis anymore. It feels like the weather, ambient and ordinary, just the way things are. Sit with how strange that is for a second, because you are looking at the thing this entire long night has been about. 140 years ago, Nietzsche stood at the edge of all this and called it the most dangerous idea in history, a catastrophe still travelling toward us across the centuries. And here it is. It arrived, though not the way anyone pictured, not as a great darkness or a wave of despair, but as a mood, a faint flatness you can scroll right past 100 times a night. There's even a name for the whole condition now, popularized by a contemporary cognitive scientist, the meaning crisis, the widely shared modern sense that the old wellsprings of meaning have quietly run dry and nothing has stepped in to replace them. The most dangerous idea in history turned out to be so quiet, in the end, that we mostly mistook it for boredom. A British thinker named Mark Fisher gave this exact mood its sharpest description in a small, furious book about 15 years ago. He noticed that the dominant feeling of our era isn't really nothing means anything in some grand metaphysical sense. It's something more specific and more paralyzing. The sense that this, whatever this is simply the way things are and always will be and cannot be changed. He called it capitalist realism, the deep, unspoken conviction that the world as it's currently arranged is the only world there could be, that no fundamentally different way of living is even thinkable anymore. He borrowed a line, often credited to other thinkers before him, that nails it. It has become easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of the system we live inside. And he named what that does to a person, especially a young one, reflexive impotence. You know things are bad. You know with total clarity that you can't do anything about them, and that knowledge, the certainty of your own powerlessness, becomes its own kind of depression. The climate dread that ends in a shrug, the political fury that burns out into doom scrolling. The last man we met hours ago, blinking, except now he has a phone, and the phone is very, very good at keeping him blinking. Fisher understood all this from the inside, with a depth that came at a terrible cost. He took his own life in 2017. I mention it not as a detail, but as a gravity, a reminder that the flat, ambient nothing we're describing is not always harmless, that for some people, the dimmer switch goes all the way down, and that what we're circling tonight is, for real people, a matter of life. The internet being what it is, it has also produced its own homemade answer to all of this, and you've probably scrolled past it too. It usually goes by the name optimistic nihilism, and the pitch is genuinely appealing. Nothing matters, so relax. If the universe is indifferent and your life is a cosmic accident, then there's no grand exam you're failing, no judge keeping score, no master plan you're falling short of, which means you're free. Free to stop worrying, free to make your own small meanings, free to enjoy the strange brief gift of being here at all. And there's something real in it. It's Camus and Sartre, more or less, compressed into a 4-minute video with a soothing voiceover. But lying here in the dark, you can also feel the place where it turns slippery, because nothing matters so relax can be two completely different things wearing the same words. Genuine peace, the lucid, hard-won calm we've been circling all night, or an anesthetic, a way of pressing the dimmer switch down a little further so you don't have to feel the thing it's numbing. And the trouble is that from the inside, in the moment with your thumb on the screen, the two can be very hard to tell apart. So is there a real answer anywhere in here, or only better and worse ways of coping? On this, the news is more hopeful than the doom scroll lets on, and it comes from two directions at once. The first is old and hard-earned. A psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi camps and watched who lived and who gave up, came out convinced that meaning is not something the universe owes you or hands you. It's something you find in 3 places, none of them cosmic. In work you actually care about, in love for particular people, and in the attitude you take towards suffering you can't avoid. He had a name for our specific modern sickness, decades before the phone existed, the existential vacuum, the hollow boredom of a creature with all its needs met, and no idea what any of it is for. And his answer to the vacuum was almost insultingly concrete. Don't go looking for the meaning of life. Find the meaning of Tuesday, the one task, the one person, the one small thing that genuinely asks something of you, and the vacuum starts, quietly, to fill. The second direction is newer, and it surprised even the researchers who found it. When they actually started measuring meaning, asking large numbers of ordinary people carefully whether their lives feel meaningful, they did not find the wasteland the crisis talk predicts. They found that most people, most of the time, rate their own lives as fairly meaningful. The meaning was already there, in the relationships and the work and the small daily devotions. Mostly unnoticed, mostly unglamorous, mostly fine. And when those same studies ask where the meaning comes from, the answer is almost embarrassingly consistent and almost embarrassingly ordinary. Not grand achievements or cosmic purpose, but other people, the particular ones, the ones near you, which lands with a special sting at this hour given what you're doing right now. You are most likely alone. The thing in your hand is the most sophisticated machine ever built for simulating connection while delivering almost none of it. And the loneliness behind the glow is not a side effect. It's close to the center of the whole modern ache. The prophecy didn't only arrive as a flat mood. It arrived as a room with one person in it, lit by a screen, surrounded by billions of others doing exactly the same thing, each one alone. And that points at the one question I want to leave you holding tonight, because it's the question this whole long night has quietly been turning into. We started hours ago with the dangerous one. Does anything matter really? And we've followed it honestly all the way down through Dostoevsky and the firing squad and the death of God and the silent stars and the empty self and the cold logic of the seminar, and we have not been able to prove from the outside that anything matters at all. The case stayed open, and yet there is one thing the idea, for all its power, has never once been able to explain. Tomorrow morning, you are going to get up. The alarm will go off in the dark. The floor will be cold, and there will be no cosmic reason waiting to greet you. No proof delivered overnight that your day is worth living, and you will get up anyway. You'll make the coffee, answer the message, keep your small promises. Almost everyone does, almost every day, including the philosophers who argued that none of it is justified. So maybe the question was never quite the right one. Not why does nothing matter, but why, in the teeth of an idea you cannot refute, do you keep on living as though it does? You don't have to answer that tonight. You don't have to answer it ever in words, but you might, before you sleep, do one small thing with it. Put the phone down, actually down, face down, somewhere you'd have to reach for it, and the screen goes black, a dark mirror with nothing in it now but the dim shape of the room and, if you tilt it, your own face. Let the last little light go out. Feel the bed take your weight. Notice that you are still here, still breathing, the question still unanswered, and you still, somehow, intact. Everything we've gathered across this long night, the prophet and the novelist, the rock and the leap, the emptiness and the silence, all of it comes down, in the end, to you, lying in the dark, with one question left that no one has ever managed to close. It has been yours all along, and it's almost time to be left alone with it. So here you are then, back where you started, in the dark, in the quiet, with the question. Except it isn't quite the same question anymore, and you aren't quite the same person holding it. At the very beginning of the night, before any of the names, it was simple and frightening. When the feeling comes that nothing matters, is it a discovery, the truth finally showing through, or just a mood the dark plays on a tired mind? We still can't answer that, even now, even here. But we've done something to it over these hours. We followed it all the way down, met nearly everyone who ever took it seriously, and watched it change shape in our hands. And what it's become at the bottom of the night is stranger and quieter and a great deal harder to be afraid of. Look at what the great answerers actually offered when you line them up. Nietzsche handed you the heaviest test. Could you love your one life so completely, every wound and every joy, that you would will it back unchanged, forever, and called the yes to that the only victory worth having? Camus handed you the rock and the strange dignity of pushing it with your eyes wide open, refusing both the false comfort and the easy exit. Beauvoir showed you that your freedom was never solitary, that every no you make has other people folded inside it, and that this is where a real ethics grows back from the rubble. The traditions of the East turned the whole thing over and showed you that the emptiness you'd braced against was never a pit to fall into, but the open, connected room you have always been living in. And Frankl, who had stood in the actual worst the world can do, said it most plainly of all: stop demanding the meaning of life and find the meaning of this work, this person, this Tuesday, and watch the vacuum begin to fill. Every one of them is offering you something real, and not one of them can prove they are right. That is the thing the long night keeps returning to, and it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise here at the end. The skeptics were never actually beaten. Heidegger's suspicion still stands, that even our boldest cures might be the disease wearing a braver face. Nagel's quiet shrug still stands, that all our heroic defiance might be taking the cosmic joke a little too seriously, and the cold prosecutor still stands at the back of the room, having shown that nobody in 2,500 years has ever once located an objective value lying out there in the world to be found, The case stayed open. We promised at the start that it would, and it did. And underneath all of it runs the one fault line none of them fully closes. The question of whether the meaning they're each offering is found or made. Whether it's a real thing, woven into the structure of the world that a good life uncovers, or a thing we fashion ourselves out of nothing and then agree to treat as real. Most of the existentialists say made, there is no meaning until you create it. Frankl says found, it was always there, waiting, in the work and the love. And the doubt that has shadowed this whole story, the one the prosecutor sharpened to a fine point, is the fear that if meaning is something we merely made, then it isn't really meaning at all. Just a story we tell ourselves, a coat we hung on a bare hook and then forgot was ever bare. But look, before you accept that, at the things in your own life that carry the most weight, the people you love, the work you have given yourself to, the promises you keep in the dark when no one is watching and no one would ever know. Were any of those handed to you, finished, from somewhere outside, or did you make them, choose this person, build this work, become bound to these promises, slowly, over years, out of 10,000 small unremarkable acts, until they were no longer choices at all, but simply the shape of who you are? The made things, it turns out, are not the weightless things in a life. They are the heaviest things in it. A love you built across a decade is not somehow less real than one that fell on you from the sky. It may be the most real thing you will ever have. And this is the turn the whole long night has quietly been bending toward, the place where the most dangerous idea finally shows its other face. Go back to the very thing that started all the trouble, the human ability to step outside your own life and ask, is any of this worth anything? That question is the poison. It is the move that dissolved the gods and emptied the heavens and left you lying here in the dark. No other animal can make it. A dog is never awake at 3 a.m, wondering whether its life amounts to anything. It is simply, wholly, a dog. The stepping back, the questioning, the terrible capacity to hold the whole of existence at arm's length and find it wanting. That is the specific gift and the specific wound of being the kind of creature you are. Now look very closely at that capacity because it cuts both ways. The same power that lets you stand outside your life and find it meaningless is the only power anywhere in the universe that can reach into a meaningless world and lay meaning down on it. They are not two separate abilities, they are one. The creature that can ask why bother is the only creature that can answer because I choose to, and have the answer count. You cannot have the meaning making without the meaning dissolving. They grow from the same root, the same strange power to look at your own existence and have an opinion about it. Which means the void you have been so afraid of, all your life and all this night, was never the enemy of meaning. It was the precondition for it. A universe that could never feel meaningless would be a universe that could never mean anything either. It would just be matter, doing what matter does, with nobody home to care. The ache you feel, the one that whispers that none of this matters, is the very same organ you do all your mattering with. The antidote was hiding, the whole time, inside the poison. There is an old story Tolstoy loved, in the depth of his own despair, that holds all of this better than any argument can. A man, fleeing a wild beast across the open country, climbs down into a dry well and sees at the bottom a dragon waiting with its jaws open. He cannot drop down into the dragon and he cannot climb back up into the beast. So he clings to a small branch growing out of a crack in the wall. And as he hangs there, 2 mice, one white and one black, day and night, begin to gnaw quietly through the root of the branch. He knows, with perfect clarity, that in a little while the branch will give and he will fall. There is no rescue coming. And then he notices, on the leaves of that same branch, a few drops of honey, and he reaches out his tongue and he licks them. For most of his life, Tolstoy read that as the portrait of a fool, that once you have seen the dragon, once you truly know how it ends, the honey should turn to ash in your mouth, and the man licking the leaves is only refusing to look. But there is another way to read the very same scene, and it might be the whole of whatever wisdom this long night has to offer. The dragon is real. The mice are real, and they are gnawing right now at the root of your branch and at mine. None of that is in question, and the one promise I can make you is that I've never tried all night to pretend otherwise. And the honey is also real. The drops are actually there on the actual leaves. To see the dragon clearly, and the mice, and to reach out your tongue and taste the sweetness anyway, not because you have proven it outweighs the fool, not because you have won the argument, but simply because the honey is there and you are still alive to taste it. That is not the act of a fool. It may be the bravest and most lucid thing a human being ever does. Carrying the question well, in the end, comes down to just this: keeping your eyes open on the dragon and tasting the honey anyway. So that is where we'll leave it. Not solved, not closed, just carried a little further than it was and grown a little lighter than it felt at the start of the night. You don't have to decide tonight whether anything finally matters. The question will keep. It has kept for 25 centuries. It will keep until morning. And in the morning, you'll do the thing the whole argument can't account for and doesn't need to. The light will come up at the edge of the curtains. The alarm will go, or it won't. And you will get up. You'll put your feet on the cold floor and stand in a universe that still hasn't handed you a single reason, and go and make the coffee. That ordinary, unremarkable daily act, rising and continuing with no proof in the teeth of the most dangerous idea there is its own kind of answer, not an argument, but a life. The honey tasted one more day. The dragon can wait. It is very good at waiting. For now, there is only this room and the dark and the weight of you in the bed, and a question that has finally stopped being frightening and become something more like company. You carried it all the way down here. You can set it on the nightstand now, beside the phone, and let it rest too. Your breathing has already begun to slow. You don't have to help it. The body knows this part. It has done it every night of your life. This small letting go, this quiet nightly rehearsal of the very thing we spend our days so afraid of. Let it happen. The question is yours. It isn't going anywhere. Sleep carries its own answers sometimes, or it doesn't, and you wake with the same one, and that is all right too. Either way, it will still be here in the morning, or it won't, and either way, so will you. Rest now. Let the dark hold you. Good night.